Well, thank you. Sorry, don't speak Spanish, or my Spanish is very bad, but I understand that more people speak English than French. Therefore, I've decided to talk in French this morning, so you can follow directly or through the translation, I hope. And when Carlos Martinez initially asked me to join this conference, I didn't know that the controversy on environment and ecology was so intense in Chile. And since I'm doing my homework and research on what is going on in your country, I've discovered that environment and ecology and the conflict between people in favor and in charge of development and the people who put nature above mankind, this conflict has become very intense, and that the hydro-Isen project has become quite a symbol of this conflict. And if the Señora Ministra Benitez forgives me, but I like humor. And when I was listening to your huge agenda in favor of biodiversity, I was wondering if in biodiversity and among protected species, men and women would appear at a certain moment. But basically, it was about birds, penguins, and flowers, which I do love. I'm a great gardener and landscaper, but I do think that human beings do belong to biodiversity. And but I understand this is not exactly your focus. So forgive me for this touch of humor. And congratulations for the ambitious agenda which you have presented to us. Well, I will cope directly with the dilemma between development and nature, if there is one. I want to get directly into this controversial debate on what is the perfect, if any, relationship between human development, economic development, and protection of nature. And I do think that in Chile, I mean, this debate is very relevant for one reason, which I just mentioned, which are these huge hydroelectric project for the country, and I will come back to that. But also when I look at the history of the Chilean nation, after all, the Chilean nation is based on a permanent struggle between man and nature. Nature has not been very generous with Chile. It was not an easy country to live in. And, the agriculture has been extremely difficult. This is not Argentina. This is not a generous nature. And fishing is difficult. Mining is difficult, as we know. You have earthquake, you have tsunami, you have everything. So you have a very specific relationship with nature. And Chile, in fact, if I look at history of Chile, is a permanent struggle with nature, and it's a permanent conquest of nature. Nature has not been generous, and you had to fight nature, you had to fight natural elements, and you are still fighting these natural elements because of earthquake, as we just mentioned, because mining is difficult, as you know better than anyone, and the world knows. And so Chile is based also on the exploitation of nature. Without mining, fishery, exploitation of wood resources, and so on, and this difficult agriculture, Chile would not exist. Therefore, when I listen to the people who want to protect Chilean nature, I say, well, okay, but protect what? What is nature? And nature, once again, has not been that good with the Chilean people. It's a conflicting relationship. It's a conflicting relationship. And so we are in a controversial situation. We are in a kind of a dilemma. How do you get out of this dilemma? I mean, if you can, I mean, how do you solve complicated matters like the current conflict on the hydro-Isen project? There is a way. The way is, as the Senor Guzman said in his introduction, the way is democracy. So what is democracy? Democracy is not just about election and institution. Democracy is mostly about open discussion, open debate, and transparency. And I was very interested to join this meeting this morning because I consider that this morning this is an exercise in democracy. I don't know who you are. You more or less know who I am. I don't know what you think. I don't know on what side you are. Maybe you are on the side of economic development. Maybe you are more on the side of the penguins. I don't know. As I don't know, I invite you to get into an open discussion and at least to know about what we are talking about. Because in this debate, we use a lot of words which we never define. What is nature? What is development? What is progress? What is an NGO? Kind of a new animal. I don't know if in the biodiversity there is something for NGOs among the penguins and other birds, if it's a threatened species. What is ecology? So what I like to do this morning is try to define these words and bring some transparency in the debate. And then when anyone can make a decision according to the rule of law and the process, the sophisticated process which exists in Chile, which allow to make decisions based on the rule of law. Let's take some of the words which are used in this debate. I mentioned democracy. As I said before, I mean, Chile is a rather young democracy. So you have the institutions of democracy, and these institutions are being perfected and more sophisticated, and we just the senior minister explaining, I mean, how the rule of law will be extended and be more transparent, and the decision process would be more clear. But also, democracy requires an intense participation of the people. Democracy requires that this kind of meeting should take place all over the country, and that things should be debated openly, people should be informed, facts should be given. And I feel, sorry, I'm a foreigner, I mean, I'm only a visitor, but I'm come to Chile since 25 years every year. So there is progress, of course, huge progress in transparency and information, but since, I mean, the room for debate is rather limited in Chile. So I think that democratization in Chile, and this is valid for any country, of course, requires a deepening in debate and a larger participation of the citizens in the decision process. And this applies very much to the hydro-Eisen investment, for example, where so far the people have not been that well informed, and there have been not many discussions except at a local level. So democratization is one of the elements which allows a decision process to be made, and also when the decision is made, decision will be respected, because a fundamental element of a democracy is not that the majority decide. A fundamental element is that the minority should be respected. And this is very important in this kind of debate. And some of us are more on the side of economic development, some others are more on the side of nature protection. But whatever, the decisions should respect the majority rights and the minority rights, because everybody is right, after all. I mean, nobody can pretend to be, the owner of the truth. The truth is a bit everywhere. I mean, the defender of nature do all part of the truth, and the defender of progress as well. So we need a regulatory process, we need a debate, we need a discussion, but we need also to respect the people we disagree with. And a true democracy is a democracy where the minority is respected, and that you accept that the people who disagree with you do share part of the truth. And they will accept the rule of the majority if you respect them, and if the decision is made at the end of a very long debate and process. The second concept that I want to deal with, much more complicated in the concept of nature. Nature is not a very clear concept. And what is nature? I mean, what is the limit? And is nature good? Is nature bad? And how far do you go in protecting the nature? I mean, what about the rights of the virus and microbes, which are part of that biodiversity? I mean, should they be respected? So nature is good and bad, and nature doesn't exist as such. It is we, mankind, who define what is nature and what is not nature. So we have decided that some landscape must be respected because they are more beautiful than others. Based on what? If you look at the history of nature, the representation of nature, you have big changes along the centuries. Until the 18th century, in Europe, for example, nature was usually considered as bad and dangerous. If you read all the literature, the European literature, nature was a threat. The forest was a threat, the mountains were a threat, everything was a threat, because the Western civilization has been based on the conquest of nature. It's because we have been able to control nature, to exploit nature, that we were able from the Dark Ages to reach civilization. So this kind of respect of nature, idealization of nature, even nature as God, this is quite a new concept. It appeared with the Romantic literature, but it appeared mostly in wealthy countries in the 20th century. That's interestingly enough, the most active environmentalist groups emerge in rich countries. The Green Movement started in Germany. It started in France. It started in the United States. So you need to reach a certain level of civilization and of a material satisfaction to become a defender of nature. In poor countries, the defense of nature is not the priority. The priority is to survive. And in order to survive, you better confront nature or exploit nature. So when we talk about nature, it is not an absolute concept. It is a relative concept. It has to do with the situation in which presently you are. And I say this because very often we use now this concept of nature as if it was an eternal and absolute concept. So our relation with nature changes, and also the way we define nature changes, what we find beautiful changes, and also nature is never pristine. I read a lot of texts and I hear a lot of talks about Patagonia, the pristine Patagonia, as if it had been never touched. This is not true. In Patagonia, people always lived there, transformed Patagonia. Cattle have been raised in Patagonia and did impact the landscape. So the very notion that there is an immutable nature, eternal nature, this is not true. The presence of mankind have always been there. Nature have always been transformed. And what we consider as natural, eternal nature, if you look at the past, this nature looked completely different.